Welcome to Fluxedo Junction. I'm Scott Kuchler. Each week we bring you the best music of all genres from throughout the world, and this week we'll be speaking with singer-songwriter and guitarist Kevin McLeod. Kevin has a long musical history involving several different projects, and we'll be touching on most of them. Lately, however, his primary project would be his own Kevin McLeod Band, who will be performing on February 15th at Bartini Bar in Babylon, New York, and on March 7th at Finley's of Green Street in Huntington, New York. But let's get things started with the studio track. Here's a song called Mercury is in Retrograde from Kevin McLeod, here on Fluxedo Junction.
Mercury is in retrograde. I'm looking at a full moon. They say disaster is imminent. I say it can't come too soon. You see, my love life's a shambles. My job is nothing but stress. I'm relieved to have something to blame for this mess. Mercury is in retrograde. All these planets and stars exert gravity on the gravity of the situation. My inclination is to address this with guitars. Mercury is in retrograde. I feel it under my skin. Lord knows it's responsible for the sad shape I'm in. A line of creditors trails me. They brighten as I decay. But I can't change direction or stop this decline. I'm dragged every step of the way. 'Cause Mercury is in retrograde, and I'm looking at a full moon. They say disaster's imminent. I say it can't come too soon. They say disaster's imminent. I say it can't come too soon. They say disaster's imminent. I say it can't come too soon.
I've known you for a really long time. My earliest memories of you and your music would easily go back to the, late 90s. And back then you were a part of a duo, right? It was Stefano and McLeod.
That's correct.
That's going way back, yeah. And I was playing with Tom Palmentary in those days, and we ended up on the same bill for a while. And then I'm going to ask you to fill in the gaps. I'm going to tell you everything I remember from that point on. So we did many gigs with you guys. And then he moved. And for a while, I think you were working on your own. But then I recall you hooking up with Janine and Amarato and Nicole.
Yep.
Was it called Buddha Box when you were working with them?
No, it was Buddha Triangle. That was after Will moved to England.
Right.
And I was playing solo, and they were kind of like, sad because they lost Will and couldn't gig anymore. And I mean, I had met them again, you and Will, like while you were doing the Tom Palmentary music. I think you were also doing Fluxedo Junction.
Yes, when Fluxedo Junction was a band and not a radio show, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I met you, you and Will at that time also, and, Janine and Nicole, because, they would come up and jam at that.
Right, yeah, it was all kind of tied together at that point.
Open mic at Finley's.
Oh, yeah, right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was a good open mic.
I would go down there and play also. So, I mean, we kind of all got to know each other, I think in those days. And then when Will went to England and I was still gigging, at some point I had a conversation with either Janine or Nicole, was like, yeah, why don't you just sing with me on some gigs? And that just worked for a while then too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have amazing voices, and you're an amazing writer. And my favorite, as you know, my favorite song of yours, because I've mentioned it to you before, is Brooklyn 1964. The optimism that you're able to convey in that song, that the optimism of its time. You know what I mean? Like, it really, the song feels like a time capsule. Like, I feel very connected to, I'm 55, so I was born in 69, so, I don't really have very conscious memories of the 60s, but I've got memories of the time period immediately after that, and things were starting to change, but there was still, I think, some familiarity there, because I really relate to, maybe it's because I was born in Queens, and I think about, that year 64 with the World's Fair and everything.
Yes.
I don't know, it just evokes something in me every time you play it, and I think it's extremely well written. I mean, you've written a lot of really, really great songs, but in my opinion, that's maybe one of your very best.
Oh, thank you, Scott. I mean, and I agree with your take on the song. I mean, initially, I was born in 61, and I guess around 64 or 65, my parents moved the family out to Levittown, but before then we were living in Brooklyn. And I just had these early memories of Brooklyn. My grandparents lived there too, and I can remember going over to one of the piers where, the Verrazano Bridge was just getting finished, right? That was opened in 64.
Yeah, I used to live right across the street from that pier that you sing about in the song.
Really?
Yeah, as an adult. Like, I moved there, with somebody I was dating at the time, and
That's so cool.
for about 6 months, lived on Shore Road, right across from the promenade over there, and that pier, it was shut down the whole time I was living there. Now it's open again. But yeah, maybe that's another thing about the song that hits me, because when you sing about that, I know I've been there, I know what you're talking about, and I know that view, and I don't know, it's just such great work.
Thank you. And I think, it started out really just as me kind of thinking back to these early childhood memories, but eventually, like you say, the other things that I brought into it were, in the United States, maybe it was a worldwide thing too, there just seemed to be this whole sense of optimism in the early 60s, right, about what humanity could accomplish. And by the end of the 60s and the early 70s, it just seemed like a lot of it was smashed to bits, right?
Yeah, well, I guess, without getting too scholarly or political about it, I guess part of that encroaching pessimism that changed things so much and again, I was a child, I was an infant, so I'm only going on what I've read, but, between the mixed signals we were getting reported back to us about what was actually happening in Vietnam, combined with, Watergate.
Assassinations at the end of the 60s.
Yeah, it bred a lot of suspicion, and with suspicion comes pessimism, yeah.
Yeah.
Very sad, because that's another thing that I'm sure everybody relates to on that song, which is, we had it was all right there. As a nation, I feel like that was a time period where things legitimately could have gone a very different way, and it has nothing to do with really straight political lines there. It's just the optimism was gone. Also, Kennedy getting assassinated, I guess, would have been a big one.
For sure.
Yeah.
I turned 3, my mom and dad struggle for my sisters and me. They keep their promise for rich or for poor in Brooklyn, 1964. In the afternoon sun, we'll walk to the store. Small bells chime as we open the door. I play in the sawdust on the butcher shop floor in Brooklyn, 1964. But the wind that's blowing down this street will carry me away, and my eyes will never shine again the way that they sparkle today. Takes me through the streets of Bay Ridge to the pier where we sit and admire the new bridge. He says there's nothing we can't build or explore in Brooklyn, 1964. In Brooklyn, 1964. In Brooklyn, 1964. In Brooklyn, 1964.
Well, listen, I'd like to talk to you because you have a couple of different combinations that you create music in. I've seen you do all sorts of stuff. Obviously, you've got different size versions of the Kevin McLeod Band. I've seen you play, with a huge band with what, like 6 people, 7 people?
Yes.
And then I've seen you in a trio, just recently in a trio. I've seen you sit in with Jimmy Durso's group, playing crazy guitar that I always knew you were a great guitar player, but I didn't know that you had that in you. And everything in between, and like we mentioned before, a Buddha Triangle, and even your stuff from the duo years ago. You're very diverse. What is it that makes you that way? Is it the books you're reading? Is it the music you're listening to? Is it the food you're eating? Where's it coming from?
I don't know about the food I'm eating, but I would say a combination of some of those things, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, the diverse music that I listen to and that I've listened to all my life, and then because of that, the different musical styles I've gotten into. I always found it interesting, or I still find it interesting, And, you might notice this too, because I've heard you play in acoustic settings, in electric settings, and sometimes whatever setting people are used to seeing you in, like they kind of assume that that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
But when I moved out to Long Island after, living in New York City for a bunch of years with my wife, our daughter was a year or two old, we moved out to Babylon. When I was living in the city, I was playing with kind of like a R&B funky fusion band called True to Life in Manhattan. And that's what I was doing there. And when we moved out, I think the first musician that I met that I started to work with on something was Phil DiStefano. But it wasn't the acoustic thing. We played together in a jazz group called Straight Ahead for a while. Mm-hmm. And we used to play a bunch of different bars in Huntington, and we'd play at Heckscher Park in the summertime for different things. But as things happened, that was like a 7-piece band too. Eventually, I guess the tides changed, and both bars and different other situations didn't have the budgets to pay a 7-piece band anymore. Yeah. So we were like, well, let's play some acoustic gigs. And so we went from doing that to playing acoustic gigs. Phil moved away. I recorded my first CD. I was still playing acoustic gigs, and eventually, as I recorded other music, put together the Kevin McLeod Band as a way to play the full arrangement, that I was recording. Plus the fact that I like improvisation a lot, Scott, too, right? Whether it's, one of the jazz groups or in my rock band, I like the ability to play with musicians who can kind of like play off each other and change things up.
I know musicians hate these kinds of questions, but I really feel compelled to ask, how would you describe yourself as a musician, or as a songwriter? And would you be specific if somebody was just like, oh, what kind of music do you do? Do you have an easy answer for that, or is it not quite that simple?
Yeah, I never have an easy answer. Like, if somebody is just looking for something analogous, I'd say, well, for the Kevin McLeod Band, if you like bands like, Dire Straits or Clapton solo stuff or Hot Tuna,
nice.
You're probably going to like the Kevin McLeod Band too, because I think there is that mix of attention to songwriting, but at the same point, the band, there's a lot of guitar solos, the whole band can improvise, there's that aspect of it too.
You really like collaborating with people, don't you? I mean, I know that you, well, actually, I don't know for sure, but I've always suspected that as a songwriter, you were pretty solitary, but that you seem open to input from other people, whether it be a large group or a small group. I've known you to play with a lot of different types of people. You must really like collaborating on some level.
I really do, Scott. And that's whether I'm sitting in with another band, like Coincidence Machine, right? And I'm trying to adapt to their particular style and where they're coming from musically. Or in my own band, I really appreciate what individual musicians bring to a project. Like even my band, the CDs that I've recorded, I've used some very talented studio musicians on. And when the band has played them, sometimes the musicians, have been a little nervous and been like, I can't, replicate that. And I'm like, I don't want you to replicate that. I like the way you play. I want you to bring that to, let's recreate the spirit of the song, but, you don't have to play the same part. I want you to bring yourself to the music.
Yeah, well, that shows, really, it does, in, live performance particularly, and because, I guess, in live performance, it's obvious, it's right there in front of you, who the other personalities are that you're working with. But I kind of think of it in the same way that I think of Duke Ellington. You know what I mean? Like, when Duke Ellington wrote for his orchestra, like, he worked hard to keep together the same group of people for 40 years, at a lot of times, paying out of his own pocket just to keep the guys together. And so that they wouldn't go out and get another gig, because he wrote parts specifically for, specific musicians. He would write a trumpet part, specifically thinking of a certain guy in mind. But I don't get that impression from you. I feel like your love of improvisation is sort of what your collaborative process might be based on. I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But in terms of just using a large group, the way you would use an orchestra, it really feels, right down to the fact that you've got a vibe player with you sometimes. Yeah, I mean, a vibes player.
Right.
And that really does add a sense of epicness, I guess. I mean, your music is so, in so many ways, it can be introspective and it can be very thoughtful, but at the same time, it feels epic in scale. And sometimes that has to do with the lyrics, sometimes that has to do with the composition, but sometimes it has to do with what the other musicians you're working with are contributing.
Yes. And in that regard, when I'm writing jazz music, sometimes, I'll know who I might be getting to play on a piece, right? So I might write a sax player with someone in mind. A sax part. Or I may write, have a bass part or a groove with someone in mind. With the rock stuff, I think you kind of nailed it earlier, where you say initially it is kind of like a solitary job, right? Writing the song. But once the song's done, I feel it's kind of like it's malleable, right? Once the song is done, it's done. It's got a life of its own. So depending on what musicians are either in the band regularly or who can be brought into the band from time to time, that changes everything. And when I know people can play, sometimes I just give them space. There's a live version of the song called Sirens in the Distance that was on my Road Home album, the first one that I did. And we played it a couple of months ago at Bartini. And in addition to, let's say, the 4-piece core band, we had Claudio Muller on vibes, David Rosenblum was sitting in on sax. And the song ends on the record with this, 3 or 4 minute guitar solo. But that night I was like, Claudio, you and David, I want you to just play out the ending. And they just did such cool things, like improvising together at the end. And I really like when things happen like that in the moment, Scott.
There's no sleep at midnight. Someone pounds the basement door. I hear Alex talk to Carmen, saying, what you come here for? Carmen says, I missed you, baby. Got her kids with her too. She's dying for some affection. Alex just says, fuck you. I hear sirens in the distance. The subway rumbles down below. I would leave here in a minute somewhere else to go. Voices shout above me, nothing I haven't heard before. The fighting will continue until Michael slams the door. And he won't be back till morning. So Madeline will sleep alone and cry about her situation and dream of being on her own. And I hear sirens in the distance. The subway rumbles down below. I would leave here in a minute if I had somewhere else to go. I hear sirens in the distance. The subway rumbles down below. I would leave here in a minute if I had somewhere else to go. change of scenery. So I wandered through the neighborhood, down Broadway, then 41st Street. And I'm almost feeling good, but then I hear a woman crying. Some guy calls her a disgrace. She taunts him like she knows what's coming. He reaches back, slaps her face. I hear sirens in the distance. The subway rumbles down below. I would leave here in a minute if I had somewhere else to go. I hear sirens in the distance. Subway rumbles down below. I would leave here in a minute if I had somewhere else to go. If I had somewhere else to go. Somewhere else to go. Somewhere else to go. Somewhere else to go. Somewhere else.
Sure, and with a guy like David Rosenblum, I mean, both musicians you mentioned are awesome, but I've worked with David, and yeah, he can fill a lot of space if you let him, on any number of instruments too, which is great. Yeah, it's funny because actually that's only one of two musicians that more than two over the years if you really go back to Will and everything else, but Brian Barkin, I'm thinking specifically, we actually share a bass player in Brian Barkin. He's so great. I was listening to a recording the other day that it was a 51s recording. It just so happened to be we just did a gig and I was listening to it and I was like, man, this guy is so good, and he has like no ego whatsoever. It's all about the song at all times, And he's solid. He's really solid. He serves your music really well.
Thank you. And I think in Brian's case, in addition to being really solid, Brian has like a really good bass sound.
Yeah.
Just the sound of that he gets from the bass and the amp is just like right there. It's fat and round. I enjoy having him in the band.
Yeah, he's very, very reliable on every level. I love working with that guy, and I love hearing him with your music. I always, whenever I can, make a point of being there to catch that because, he's something special. And look, you're something special. You're clearly something special. I mean, I've been an admirer of yours for many, many years, and, we've begun to run into each other again recently, which has been nice, but we went a while without any contact at all, and I missed it. I'm glad that your music is back in my life. What have you got coming up? What's on the horizon?
I think 2025 is going to be a busy year with some cool things. We have some additional gigs. I mean, I love playing at Bartini, but I'm looking to get the Kevin McLeod Band into some other venues as well. In addition to that, the Tone Healers, my Long Island jazz group, we've got some gigs planned for 2025. My New York City jazz group, True to Life, which is that group that I had in Manhattan before moving out to Long Island. Periodically, we get together and we'll either record or we'll gig for a while in the city. And we've got a rehearsal scheduled for January, so I'm hoping that group gets out and plays some more too.
Nice.
And I'm still doing some gigs with Coincidence Machine. So, in addition to that, I've got like a whole bunch of both jazz compositions and new songs that are like just about finished. So I'd love to get in the studio and do some recording next year too, Scott.
Real quick, because I was just getting ready to wrap this up and ask for where people can find you on the web. But before we do that, have you written for films before? Do you do soundtrack work?
I have not. That is not something that I've done before.
Have you ever thought about it? Because, I mean, I guess everybody thinks about it a little bit at any given time. But there's something, now, the word that I've been searching for this entire interview is cinematic. There's something cinematic about your lyrics. And I just would love to see some visual representation of what's going on in your head in addition to musical. Is there any chance that you might go down that road one day?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I kind of leave everything open, right? As opportunities present themselves, I'm always interested in digging in. And thank you for that compliment on the lyrics too, because to me, most of my lyrics tell some kind of story. So I appreciate you picking up on that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Where is the best place people can find you on the web?
KevinMcLeodBand.com.
Excellent.
Place.
Kevin, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the time. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your music. And I look forward to the next time we see each other in person.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's been a pleasure chatting with you tonight.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Music, and they invited me to collab on a song with them. They approached me with the idea of a song for peace, a song to kind of represent the hope that there can be and that there is in some people in these times of turmoil. And I'm just really thankful to be a part of this creation, and I hope that you enjoy and you have an experience and you get something out of it. Slow burn. It needs a spark to light. We all learn to speak up when something's not right. There's a few that will try to keep us apart.